Hey there, Danielle Matthews here. I'm coming to you live from Florida, and today is Monday, so we are doing book club day. We are in the midst of reading The Power of Now. This book club will be finishing up chapter 9. I believe it was chapter 9, and then we've got one more left, which is crazy. If you're new to my content, I absolutely love discussing spiritual development. I think it is the thing that helps any entrepreneur, any business professional really get the most out of their career, out of their personal life. Teaching you how to master the inner dimensions of your world is key. And book club is a fabulous place to do that because there have been a lot of masters, a lot of greats that have written down what they learned. And these are shortcuts, right? Shortcuts so that we can not have to go through all the challenging things. We can learn from the people that have walked the path before us. If you are joining me live for book club, let me know when you get here so that I know you're here. We can begin. If you're catching the replay, let me know you're catching the replay. And I'll just say you do not have to have read this entire book with us. If you're just listening to this now, really this entire chapter is about what to do with negative emotions, how to allow them to move through you, and also how ultimately that leads to, hey Christy, how ultimately that leads to world peace. It was like there was a turn at the end of this chapter that I was not expecting, which was really the role that each of us plays in creating the external world that we're all really desiring and wanting. And good morning, Fritz. It's good to see you. So that's what we're getting into today. And after you listen to this, if you feel like a friend of yours would really benefit from this, please tag a friend. Let them know what this is all about. And each of these conversations that we have week to week really are standalone. And they could shift somebody's life just by listening to it. So I appreciate you for sharing, for tagging friends. And for those of you that are here now, let's dive in. All right. We were just finishing, we were on page 158, and we kind of read through the end of the chapter. And really the conversation that Eckhart Tolle was having here, hey Lou, the conversation that he was having here was really about how do you deal with negative emotions? All right. And the question really is, look, when we have negative emotions, like how do we initiate the change so that either they no longer come or we learn how to manage them properly, whatever it might be. And he says, Eckhart Tolle says, look, any changes you're going to make, I'll read the quote. He says, any changes that you make, whether they be at your work, with your relationships, with your surroundings, he says, ultimately they're cosmetic changes. And I think this is key for people to understand, oh, well, that triggered me. That upset me. I'm having a negative response to this. So let me change my work environment. Let me break up with this relationship. Let me do something else externally. He says that's all cosmetic, meaning it might look better on the surface, but you haven't gotten to the core. And he says, ultimately, all of this is cosmetic unless they arise out of change in your level of consciousness. And so how do you change your level of consciousness? You do it through the power of now. You do it through becoming present. And so the question was, well, how do we stop negativity from just arising? Like, is there a way for negativity to just no longer arise within me? Like, can we get rid of it forever? Is that possible? And it's a good question. Like, put a 1 in the chat if you've wondered that. Like, will there ever be a day that it can just no longer that I have to deal with these negative things that pop up, right? I don't know about you. I would certainly like to live in that. And yes, Christy, I'm glad that you're catching this live too. It's nice to have your energy here. So what he says is that, yes, Fritz, I'm with you. I agree. It'd be nice if that just like, the negative thoughts never came anymore. And he said, you stop it from arising by being fully present. But don't become discouraged because most people, he says, there's basically a handful of people on this planet that have figured out how to become fully present all of the time. All right, so you're not alone. But luckily, he gave us some tips, like 3 things that we can do. And what he said, and I love this, he said, whenever you notice that there's some form of negativity that has arisen within you, just look on it not as a failure, like, oh man, like I still haven't mastered this. I still have negativity coming into my mind. He says, don't look at it as a failure, but as a helpful signal telling you basically, wake up, get out of your mind, be present. So like, I hope you're seeing the nuance there. So what he's basically saying is, okay, so when the negative thought comes in, You get frustrated, you get angry, you're like, why is the world this way? Everything is so crazy. Like when those things come into your being, it's like an indicator light for you that, oh, your mind is dominating you right now. You're not in the present moment right now. Hi, Charlotte. All right. And so when that comes up, he says basically just use the negative thought as like the indicator light going off for you to go, oopsies, that's not the direction I want to go down. Like, let me come back to go this direction. Let me come back to the present moment. And then he talks about this, I've never heard of this book. Had anyone heard of this book, Island, by Aldous Huxley? I've never heard the name, never heard the book. But he said that in this book, there was basically like this paradise island where all the people were actually sane, right? Because a lot of human beings, we are insane with what we do to ourselves. And yes, do an about face, Lou, exactly. Like, whoop, no, this way. Thank you for letting me know that's not the direction I want to go. But what he said is that on this island, the islanders had, there were a ton of these like beautiful parrots, right? And can you imagine these like parrots in the trees? And the parrots were saying, attention, here and now, attention, here and now. And I just freaking loved it. I just thought, oh my God, how amazing. If you could have a bird in your house that's like, be present, back to attention. Nope, get in the here, get in the now, get in the here, get in the now. And I started cracking up when I read that because I had the best visual. But that's basically what your negative thoughts are. Think of them as like the parrot in your head that's actually a chance for you to go, nope, come to the now, right? Be present. Don't go that way, right? As Lou said, about face, do a 180, no. And just high five me, put a 5 in the chat if that also just gave you like the best visual. Because I just thought, I want those parrots around me. And we do have them, right? Those parrots are those negative thoughts in your mind. So now, now you can just drop it. So step number 1, I'm loving the high fives. Hey there, thank you for all the lovely comments. You make me happy too, my friend. So basically, what he's saying is, number 1, just drop it. Use the negative thought to remind you and just let it be the indicator light. Let it be the parrot saying, no, attention, be present, right? You're going down the wrong path. Turn around. And then the second thing he says is just feel it. And this is something for those of you in mastery, like this is what we do in yoga therapy, all right? And yoga therapy, it just says, look, if you've got something there, don't resist the feeling. Allow it to be. And when you allow it, it will move through. But a lot of times when we resist something, we just make more of a mess. So you can just feel it. And this kind of gets into the third tidbit that he talks about, which is being transparent. And so what he's saying here, and this is maybe more of what I was just saying, the resistance can be far more disturbing than the original issue. All right. So all of this can be transformed. Like he's talking about transforming your life into a spiritual practice. So if you feel yourself becoming transparent, so let's say something hits up against you, the kids, a car alarm, like he says to start with like small stuff. So for example, I was at a hotel this weekend, 7 a.m., the fire alarm went off. And I was like, oh, what? And I could have been super irritated, like, who pressed the wrong button? Like, what are they doing? Why are they doing this at 5 a.m.? And instead, having this, right next to me, I just said, I'm just going to let it be. And like the fire alarm went off. I did not let myself get internally disturbed by it. I just kept doing what I was doing. And then it stopped. And that was it. And there was no hubbub, no issues, no stress that I'd created in my inner world. And that's what he's talking about with being transparent. So he basically says, let it pass right through you. Practice with the little things. Instead of having a wall of resistance inside of you that gets constantly and painfully hit up against, right? This shouldn't be happening. They shouldn't do that, right? The alarm shouldn't be going off at 7 a.m. I didn't pay to stay here to be woken up like that at 7 a.m., right? All the things that could be happening, all that wall of resistance, he says, let everything pass through. Let's say somebody's rude to you. How many have had that happen, right? Let's say somebody is rude to you. Offer no resistance. Don't engage with it. And he says, in that way, that person no longer has power over you because you're controlling your inner state. You're just going, okay. Like I remember, I'm vaguely remembering the story. Maybe somebody I feel like we've talked about in book club before, but I think it was a monk that someone was coming up to and asking questions, and one guy came up and spit in his face, like spit on him. And all he did was took out his handkerchief and wiped it away and didn't react in any way, shape, or form to what the guy did. And it was transformative for the guy to have been loved and received despite his ego, right? Literally having spit on somebody, his ego having been so engaged. When ego wasn't met with ego, right? When it just went right through and there was no resistance, ego can't exist unless it has something to resist and fight with, right? It just went right through. That guy was transparent. He was obviously enlightened. That can be harder to do. So that's why he says start with the small things. So if you happen to have an alarm go off, easy one to start with. If there's kids screaming, if something goes awry in your business, if, I don't know, somebody comes home from work and they're grumpy, like see if you can't just let that go through you, right? And just have no response to it and realize that, whoa, I get to control my internal world. Because then, my friends, you've started to master life. That is called internal karma. And that is where your power lies. All right? So, the next thing he says, anything you accept fully will get you there. Meaning to the peaceful state. Anything that you can just accept, that you don't resist, if you just accept, it's going to move you. This is the miracle of surrender. All right, this is the miracle of when we surrender to life. If you just open the door, if you say, it's okay that you're here, all of a sudden, boom, you have access to this deep inner peace. It's like so simple. How do we all keep missing it? Right? Put a 2 in the chat if you can do that. Can you just accept? Like, so much of this book has been about stop resisting and just accept. Just let it be. Be in the now. It's okay what's here, right? That's what's there. You guys can't do this? Why don't I see any 2s? Right? You guys can do this. I guarantee you can do this. Okay. He says, when you accept what is in every single moment, that it is the best, that's enlightenment. So if you can just simply accept what is, if you can be in the here and now and you can accept what is in the here and now, that is enlightenment. That simple. So I loved the start of this chapter. I thought, wow, practical. I love practical, easy things. And I'll never forget the parrot. All right. Be present, stay alert, attention, come back. All right. So the next thing he talked about was compassion and the nature of compassion. And really he was talking, so I felt about like the nature of the self originally. And he was talking about when you can abide in your being. So when you can get into the space outside of the ego mind. And I love the analogy. I often talk about the ocean and the wave, but he's talking about this as a lake. And he says, basically, if you think of yourself as a lake, there's going to be ripples on the top of the lake, right? From wind, from different things splashing in. And if you reside on the top of the lake, it can be a little bit like crazy. But if you go to the depth of the lake, if you sit at the bottom of the lake, what's the bottom of the lake like? Calm, peaceful, tranquil. It doesn't matter what waves are happening, how much wind is happening, up there. It's like it's very, very chill. Yes, Christy said this chapter was a weight lifted, an ease and feeling that it is possible. It is. It totally is. And he makes it sound so simple because it is that simple. It's just that our mind loves the drama of being on top of the lake. Like our mind loves it up there. The ego loves that stuff. It thrives on that stuff. But the truth is, in thriving, it's making stress in your body and it's going to make you sick. And so if you can just come to the bottom of the lake, observe, but be sitting at the bottom, he says, look, that's really the power of being. And he says, you're no longer dependent on fulfillment or happiness on the outer world, on the things that are constantly fluctuating. If you're trying to find your peace up there, it's going to be very hard because you can't find it in the external world, right? The external world is very good at taking it, but you can't find it. But he says, once you come into this state, into your being, coming to the bottom of the lake, you can then enjoy. You can play with the external world of form. You can create new forms. You can appreciate the beauty of it all, but there's no need to attach yourself to it because you realize that you're the power there at the bottom. All right? And this is huge. So the question was then proposed, and I love this. When you become this detached, does it mean that you also become more remote from other human beings? And this is interesting because I have often felt on the spiritual journey, it can feel a little bit lonely, where you're like, hang on, like so many people are engaged up here in this craziness. I've realized that I can be calm down here at the bottom of the lake, but like nobody else is down here. And so it can feel a little bit lonely, and you feel like a little bit like, man, am I crazy? But it's like, no, the world is just crazy. They haven't learned this yet. But what he said, and I loved it, he said, no, actually, when you go to the bottom of the lake, when you're so in touch with your beingness, when you go out into the world, you will actually truly connect with the other beings out there. Not with the mind, not with their egos, but you will see through all the BS, you will see through all of their ego, blah, 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 and you're going to see the divine in them, right? What is that, how did that just go out of my mind so quickly? Namaste, right? When you say namaste, what is it meaning? The light in me honors and sees the light inside of you. That's the being seeing the being. That's the ego is out of the way. It's the light, the divine within me is acknowledging, is looking at, is connecting into the light inside of you. And that's what he's getting at. So he's talking about, he's saying, look, it's not lonely, right? Charlotte's saying, hey, this is a good question. And I've often felt that it's a good question because I'm like, I don't understand. Like it does on some level feel lonely, but then when you go out into the world, you see the divine in literally everything. And then you feel connected to everything. And it's pretty crazy. So he says, when you come from being, you will perceive another person's body and mind as just a screen, as it were, behind which you can feel their true reality, just like you feel yours. But if you don't feel yours, if you don't get to the bottom of the lake, you're never going to feel theirs. You'll never truly be able to connect. And he says, so when you're confronted with someone else's suffering or unconscious behavior, you stay present and you stay in touch with the being. You see beyond it, right? And thus you're able to look beyond, to form and to feel the other person's radiant and pure being through your own. I thought that was beautiful, right? Who wants to go connect with others from that space? Not from the mind, but from the being space. And I bet that if you only see that, that's what you'll draw people to, right? There's something called the Pygmalion effect. And the Pygmalion effect basically says people will perform to the level that you expect them to. And like our expectations of others dictates what they do. And so if we expect to only see the divine in others, if we just look for the divine in others, we look for that being, we go beyond the ego, and we just see that, and we just speak to that, and we just hold that, like that's what we're asking people to rise to. That's pretty cool. Like when you think about it and you kind of put all of this together, I'm like, man, what a way to be in the world. If you can just be a beacon of light and just see the light in others, then we're going to have more lights on in the world, right? Because we're pulling people to that expectation of themselves. We're pulling them, or maybe we're dragging them down because we're taking them to the bottom of the lake. But whatever, maybe the analogy doesn't work that way. But we're taking them into that being state. Lou, you get it. I love the eyes. Yes, excited. I'm super excited too. Like that's what each of you has the power to do because you have this understanding. All right, and then interestingly, like the chapter took a turn. I don't know if anyone else was surprised by like how this went, but he talked about how first of all, before I get into the turn, he talked about how when you are, when you know your beingness, you can become more compassionate. And he basically says, look, compassion comes from, number one, it's two-sided. It comes from knowing how vulnerable the physical body is, knowing that we're all in the same predicament. So the next time that you think none of us have anything in common, we have our humanity in common, right? We will all die. We all have an ego mind. We're all suffering from the same mind disease, the same psychic pollution, right? You have a lot in common with every other human being. Your ego would like to tell you that you don't, but you do. You have a ton in common with every human being. And so he says, meditate on this mortality. Meditate on the fact that you will die, and you will start to have more compassion for others. All right? And then he also says the second thing that will give you compassion, it's also your immortality. The fact that you know you are the being that will be there even after this form disappears, that this form is just an illusion, and that you are actually going to be here when it goes. And then you can, again, have more compassion because you see the full picture of everyone, right? And you understand they're in the same predicament that I'm in. Whoops. Let's try and figure this out together rather than making this world more chaotic and messy. All right, and that's kind of where it went next, is that we are, like, I read this part of the chapter probably like 2 times, 3. I highlighted the whole darn thing. I'm like, okay, how do I share this? Basically, what I took from this is that nothing is as it seems. Okay, so he was talking about the fact that our mind, and in physics, right, we know this because there's been experiments, that the observer impacts the observed. So how I am looking at something impacts what I'm actually seeing. And there's, what's that movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? Like, it gets into this, and it's a whole rabbit hole, right, of like, whoa. So your state of consciousness is going to reflect out into the world certain things. And if you believe on a deep level in separation, in struggle, in survival, then that belief is going to be reflected all around you. And your perspective and your perceptions are governed by that fear. Like, you're going to see it everywhere. It's like a lens that you're wearing. All right. But he says nothing is as it seems. Whatever you perceive is only a kind of symbol. It's like an image in a dream. It is how your consciousness interprets it and interacts with the molecular energy dance of the universe, right? We actually start to create it. This is like big. And he says every being is a focal point of consciousness. And every such focal point creates its own world, all right? Even though these worlds are interconnected. So he gave an example that I thought was helpful. Like, there is an ant world. Like, right now, there are billions of ants. Like, there's definitely a ton in my yard. They're in their own world. Their own conscious level of awareness. They're creating this. Dolphins have their own world. My dog has his own world, right? And what he's saying is there are countless beings whose consciousness, their frequency is so different from ours that we're not even aware of their existence. This was what's crazy. He said highly conscious beings who are aware of their connectedness with the source and with each other would inhabit a world that to you would appear as a heavenly realm. Like, whoa, you can get yourself there. Like, that's the cool part, is he's like, then says, this is collectively where humanity is going. And he starts to cite like St. Paul and Buddhism and the New Testament and the book of Revelation. And he's like citing all of these things, saying, look, this is why the world is the way that it is. But the collective human consciousness is going to become transformed, and then nature and the animal kingdom will reflect the transformation. That's what he's talking about. And he says your primary task, so if we're all after world peace, right? How many people, I want world peace, I want world peace. He says your primary task is not to seek salvation through creating a better world. He says, no, you don't need to go out there and, fight the war on poverty. He says, actually, your primary task is to awaken out of identification with form. Your primary task is to go from being up here on the lake to going down into your beingness. He says when you do that and you connect with your beingness, it solves the illusion. And the more human beings that do that, the more the illusion will get solved, the more peacefulness there will be. And so reflected out, there will be more peacefulness. There won't be this duality. And he even says, be careful if you feel that like your job is to go out in the world and to fight hunger, to fight whatever it is. He says, truly, how you help the world is change within. When the change happens within, then it happens without. And so if you really want to do that, start at home. Start in your own inner world. Start with your own ego mind. Start with your family. Start with your friends. Start local, right? But it starts within. If you're not in the being state, you won't accomplish it. And he says, in fact, you'll start to get drawn in because you'll think it's an us versus them, right? I need to eradicate this. And you get into duality. And we've talked about duality before, right? You get into the us versus them. But the whole thing is, no, it all exists together. We're all one thing flowing in and out. This world just has polarity. And so he's saying, look, Don't do that. If you want to eliminate the effects of the unconsciousness, all of the suffering, the poverty, the death, the war, if you want to do that, he says you can alleviate the effects of unconsciousness by going to the cause. And the cause is the inner conflict. The cause is the inner division. The cause is the way that we are interacting with ourselves. Like, this was massive. I was not expecting the book to take this turn. And I'm like, holy crap. He says, Jesus tells us love your enemies, which means basically have no enemies. There is no us versus them. We're all on the human journey. We're all confused by our own ego minds. And those of us that wake up and stop getting confused by our ego minds can start to be the light, be in touch with our light, see the light in others, and draw them to that. And that is how you do it. He says the causal level needs to remain your primary focus. The teaching of enlightenment can be your main purpose, and peace, your most precious gift to the world. So he says, yeah, you can get out there and do. We can have book club like this, right? We can get out there and we can teach people to disidentify with the mind. We can teach people to recognize their unconscious patterns. We can teach people all of those things. That's what I do in Inner Management Mastery. I teach you all of these things. He says you can do that, but the truth is your being, your literal inner work, your ability to master your own mind, to be in this state, to be that light, that will shift more than anything else. And then secondarily, you can teach, right? You can share these insights. You can connect people with a book club like this. Tag them. Connect them now, right? Get people into this. It's really powerful. It's like, be the change, you know? Like, I always thought be the change in the world was, oh, I need to go do the things out in the world that I want to see change. And it's like, no, be it, right? Your beingness creates the change. So any questions with this? Because this was like heavy and simple all at the same time, and profound and deep and all the things. And it's all just sitting right here, right? He says, only those who have transcended the world can bring about a better world. Your healing influence is primarily based not on doing, but on being. Everybody you come in contact with will be touched by your presence and affected by the peace that you emanate, whether they are conscious of it or not. When you are fully present and people around you manifest unconscious behavior, you won't feel the need to react to it, right? It's like wiping off the spit. You won't feel the need to react to it, so you don't give it any reality. You just, that's not here. We're not going there. This is real, right? Be the peace. We want to tell the world, but be it. Exactly, Charlotte. Yeah. You can't tell them out there to fix it until you yourself have done it. The book is The Power of Now, for those of you that just joined us. Power of Now. And we're on chapter 9 now. All of our past book clubs are up. They're on my YouTube channel, which is just Danielle Matthews' channel. They're also on Facebook, Instagram. You can find them. And yeah, really good. Lou says, let's spread it like wildfire. Yes. Yes, indeed. Let's spread this like wildfire. So looking at next week, well, hang on. He says, we got to read this part. He says, doing this when you are fully present, right? This breaks the karmic cycle. So when you wipe off the spit, when you don't react to unconsciousness, he says, this breaks the karmic cycle of action-reaction, which is the cycle we're in on this planet. And he says, you teach through being, through demonstrating the peace of God. You become the light of the world, an emanation of pure consciousness, and so you eliminate suffering on the level of cause. You eliminate unconsciousness from the world. That's what we need. This planet needs it right now. So there's no mistake you're listening to this, okay? And if your friend tagged you in this, listen up, because you're meant to be one of those too. So, if anyone's interested in mastery, we just finished the first round of mastery, and I'm opening up another round. I'll be doing consult calls at the beginning of the week after Thanksgiving. So just reach out if you're interested. It's a deeper dive into all of this stuff. And for book club, we're into chapter 10 next, which is the last chapter. Oh, I was looking at that this morning. I went, okay. So basically, we've got 2 more weeks. So we will read up to page, let's see, I put it on here. Up to page 180, right before it says transforming illness into enlightenment. Okay, I'll put it in our Telegram chat. but we're going to read basically almost to the end of page 180 for next week, and then we'll have our final book club the week after that. And then we'll figure out what book is next. So if you've got suggestions, always open. I have an idea of what I'd like to do, but we'll, hey, wherever we want to flow with it. So thanks so much for joining, guys. As always, make sure you tag somebody that could benefit from this or share it to your page, whatever it is. The more people that are awakened to this, the better the world is that we're all going to get to live in. And I want to live amongst a bunch of bright lights. So thank you for being a bright light. Thank you for joining me live. Thank you if you listen to the replay for connecting in with this. Appreciate all of you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.